I'd like to call to order the Board of Education meeting for Monday, June 24th. If everyone would stand to recite the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, we have all board members present. Rachel, I don't know, I think you're in the wrong seat because all the newbies are over here, so. Just kidding. No, you're fine. I kind of like this, so you're fine. All right, we need an adoption of the agenda, including the supplemental personnel report.
I would make that motion.
Okay.
A second.
Motion by Jeff and a second by Tammy. All in favor? 7-0. And special presentations, we have none. We have recognition of visitors. Persons may present ideas or concerns regarding USD 443 schools. No action will be taken by the board at this meeting. Personalities and behavior of employees are not to be presented during this period, but are to be reported to the employee's immediate supervisor. The president shall determine the amount of time to be spent for citizen participation. If you'd like to address the board, please do so at this time.
Board members, Dr. Dirksen, my name is Paul Lewis. I am the chairman of the Dodge City Sports Commission, and I am here tonight to report on the recently completed Shrine Bowl activities, which Dodge City Public Schools was a significant contributor to. So Shrine Bowl week was June 4th through 8th. It started Tuesday with about 160 kids showing up for band camp. There were multiple activities going on during the week. We had a swim party for them on Thursday night. There were hamburger feeds. There were multiple activities that went on, a fun run, golf tournament, some challenges, skills challenges and different things. But the big things were on Friday night, we had a banquet out at United Wireless Arena where we had 1,000 guests in attendance, and then wrapped it up with a football game with a parade Saturday morning, and then a football game on Saturday night with about 4,500 people in attendance. So it was a great week. Everybody received rave reviews for the facilities, for the attention that all the personnel gave towards the incoming guests, and so it was just a phenomenal experience, I think, for everybody involved. We had about 200 Shriners and their spouses in town for 4 to 5 days. Overall, we had about 380 kids that came into the community, and then about 3,700 approximately that came for the football game itself. So it was a big week for the community. That equates to about 1,000 to 1,200 room nights into the community. That's really good. That was over the 5 days. Overall, that amounts to somewhat over $500,000 in economic impact and direct impact that occurred during the Shrine Bowl activities. So, and then if you figure some kind of rollover, maybe 2 or 3 times is kind of a conservative number, you can get to about $1.5 million of economic impact based on those 4 or 5 days. So it was really a significant event. I wanted to thank Dodge City Public Schools because you played a major role in helping this to come to fruition and be executed as well as it was. The Sports Commission is made up of representatives from all the different entities that have facilities that have to work together to make events like this occur. So the city has representatives because we have ball fields and have some connection to the arena. 443 obviously has Memorial Stadium, all the different schools with the gyms and the practice facilities, different things. Dodge City Community College has representatives. We use their dorms. We also use the Dome for practicing. One of the groups, I think Cheer was practicing in there. And then also Ford County because of Western State Bank Expo Center. And so we're just representatives from all those different entities that that come together and we work together to make these things happen. We've hosted, well, just this spring, we've hosted 5 different events, 2 state golf tournaments, NAIA softball tournament, 1A state basketball, and now the Shrine Bowl. And coming up later this year, we'll do the Wild West Bowl, the 6-man football championship, and we've been selected to host 1A and 2A state volleyball championships as well. The events we've hosted so far have probably brought about $1.5 million, again, in direct expenditures into the communities with hotel rooms, restaurants, and different shopping and fuel and just all of the things that travelers and visitors do. So it's really a significant, what we're able to accomplish is significant for the community. And like I said, I wanted to thank you because you played a major role with facilities and transportation and manpower. And this all couldn't happen if we don't all work together. And so we got rave reviews for everything that occurred. We're confident they're going to want to come back in a few years. We had very, very positive feedback from the Shrine Bowl people, and so we're very confident that they'll want to come back in the future, and we'll want to do this all over again. Your staff, Jay Gifford and Sean Steiner, are your 2 reps on the Sports Commission, and so they play an integral role in helping all of this come together. And so again, this is a chance to just say thank you to Dodge City Public Schools. I'm going to tell a short story, and Jackie told me I didn't have much time, so but I'll keep it brief. So we were I was with the executive director for the Kansas Shrine Bowl, and we were at Rotary giving a presentation, and he talked about the Shrine Bowl, and I was pushing what the Sports Commission was doing, trying to make that a little more aware to the community. And I was bragging on everybody's facilities because you've invested money in facilities, have great facilities, the city, the county, the college, everybody has. And so I was really bragging on everybody's facilities. And he stopped me in the middle of that and said, what you guys have is you work together. He says, that's the difference. We go other places and we don't get this level of cooperation where everybody's all at the table and everybody's saying, okay, how do we make this work? And so it kind of stopped me. But we have a great team, so thank you to Jay and Sean and all the people that are on the Sports Commission. Thank you for supporting them, and thank you for helping making this all happen. So if you have any questions, I'll answer them, but just wanted to offer my appreciation.
Thanks, Paul.
You shoulder a tremendous load in that, Paul, and we appreciate what you do.
Yeah.
And you're right, it was a blast. If you don't get involved in this kind of stuff, the TOC and all these things, you're missing out. Because it's a blast to be around these kids. It's just phenomenal.
Yeah.
It's a ton of work, and we all have fun doing it. It's a great team.
Very good.
All right.
So,
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, we have next up the consent agenda, which includes the approval of personnel, including the supplemental personnel report, approval of minutes for our June 10th and June 17th Board of Education meetings, approval of Kansas Parents as Teachers Program, a renewal of memorandum of understanding with Communities in Schools, Kansas for 2019-2020 at Dodge City High School, approval of the Classified Development Handbook update for 2019-2020, as well as the Classified Employee Handbook update for 2019-2020.
Make a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Okay. Second. Motion by Tracy, second by Jamie. All in favor? 7-0. All right, we're ready for new business, curriculum and instruction.
Good evening. Today, I just wanted to bring to you our handbook that we use for certified licensure. The state really drives what we can and cannot do when it comes to accepting teachers' professional development time, the time they sit learning about information, and then the time that they put in as they apply it or use it. And so last year, there were a lot of changes to this handbook, again, driven by the state. We had a lot of things in it that were district-led, which was fine at one time, but with streamlining on a lot of things that we have in the state. They wanted to make sure that there's nothing that interferes at what the district level does to what is allowed for state licensure. So we made a lot of changes last year. So this year, the changes are very minimal. You'll see in there just some minor things that reflected state changes. And so for an example, on page 102 in your packet, they just changed the way we apply for licensure now or renewal. And so our updates reflect that. And the other changes that you see in there is as we brought on Frontline, and Dr. Springston talked a lot about that earlier and how we were bringing in some of the PD pieces to match in with what we had as My Learning Plan. And so we joined those two together, and so you'll see name changes reflected in the handbook as well. But other than that, there are no major changes. This will be your first reading. We'll ask for approval in July. But if you have any questions, feel free to ask now, or of course you can get me in July. Okay.
Thanks, Tammy. All right, Human Resources.
Hey, good evening, Madam President, board members, Dr. Dirksen. Tonight, under Human Resources, we want to visit one of our policies, and this particular one is policy GARI, dealing with Family Medical Leave Act. And as I stated in the consideration sheet, our desire is to extend that 12 weeks of job protection to both parties if it happens to be impacting a husband-wife team or spouse team in our district. We don't want them to have to split the 12 weeks for birth of a child or adoption of a baby or whatever medical situation might arise. And so our request is that we change the language that is in that particular policy to provide the 12 weeks of job protection to each employee.
I'm happy to see this correction. It surprises me that it's in there to start with, so.
This is standard FMLA language, and if you look at the regulations on FMLA, this is the standard. We just want to do a little better than that.
Absolutely, yeah.
I'll move.
Okay.
And I'll second.
Approve.
We have a motion by Ryan and a second by Pamela. All in favor? 7-0.
Okay, thank you very much. The next two items deal with moving into the 2019-2020 raises for our different levels of staff, and I'm going to let Dr. Dirksen take over and talk about administrative salaries and classified salaries.
Okay, and this normally takes part when we're dealing with negotiations with the teachers' salaries, but at this point, we have not came to agreement on that. And we're really at the break-even point for classified contracts will start again in July, and I don't feel it's fair to them, if you will, by not providing what we had planned on giving for them just as we wait on teachers. And I think that's a little different than the precedent that's been done in the past, but that's the way that I think it ought to be done, because we have a set amount of money, and with the state Supreme Court making the ruling on school finance that they've made, we know we are getting extra money, and we feel like it is deserving that it goes to all of our employees. And so what I'm asking you to do tonight, as we work with negotiations, which we do have an executive session later, and we can update you some on that, because I think we're getting closer. I just want to make sure that we're taking care of our other people as well, and I think that's imperative. So we'll be asking for the classified employees to receive a 5% raise, and then we're looking at the administrators, which includes the directors and the non-exempt classified, which are people that are in charge of their areas. We're looking at them receiving the 4% raise based on the base of their salary sheet. I think it's obviously administrators receive more dollars than the teachers and all of that. So I think 4% is a fair amount in comparison. I think it works the best if we work from the base number so that we can be consistent with that. Otherwise, we're going to mess up those columns in the years to come, and they'll end up with goofy numbers. And there may be a time where we have to adjust those columns. We talked about that before, but I think we just need to be cautious that we don't just keep tweaking them along the way. So in essence, I mean, I want to be very clear, that will even be less than 4% for what an administrator's salary is, but it's still 4% of their base, which is a good number. So I think we're being very generous and very considerate there as well. So what do I need to add, Ramona?
No, I think you covered all the bases. I just want to remind the board that a few months ago, we came to you with updates to the administrative handbook that included new salary sheets that put some factors in there that have not been in there before. So we've already made some adjustments based on those new worksheets. So this 4% on that base is very generous.
I also think it's worth pointing out that there's been a lot of correspondence, and I will try to share some with you, of superintendents. And I've seen anywhere from 3% to 9% school districts are giving to their employees for raises because of the new money. 7%, 5%. So we're on the top half of the numbers that I'm seeing so far, but I have seen some school districts go as high as 9%. And in digging into it deeper, they were way below the base that we have. But still, that's a big jump for any district to make that commitment. So I just want you to know that that is going on around the state, so.
And you're working with the business office.
I am.
And you've also spoken with Del Dennis about.
Yes,
the
and
ability
I actually
to
will go into that
sustain
even more
this.
when we get to the topic of transferring some of the money. But no, I've been working, and Karen is there to vouch, but Nikki and Molly and Karen and I have met almost daily, if not, to go over even the simple things, because there's a lot going on down there, so I can't ignore that. So, but our communication has never been better, and we're working together on a lot of things, and everything that I'm doing is with their knowledge. So we know what's going on, and I think it's working out well so far. So
I would also add that I've been meeting with Nikki, just as we put together numbers, so she's aware of what it's looking like and can make her projections before she meets with Dr. Dirksen.
I do want to point out, though, while it's working out well, I am still keeping the position listed for possible.
Thank you.
Okay. I make a motion for approval.
Second.
For the
we do them one at a
administrator,
time?
we have to do them one at a
Yeah,
time.
we have to do them separately, yeah.
Yeah,
So,
for administrative salary, that's what I meant. You
very good.
just didn't read my mind.
Yeah. And you seconded, Jamie? Okay, so a motion by Tammy and a second by Jamie. All in favor? 7-0. And then for the classified salary?
I'll move.
Okay.
I'll second.
Motion by Ryan and a second by Tracy. All in favor? 7-0.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate that very much. Thank you.
All right, business services, it looks like it's you, Dr. Dirksen.
Okay. The next consideration sheet has to do with the approval for capital outlay expenditures and wanting to move them over to the contingency reserve. While I was on vacation, Dale Dennis, the Deputy Director of Education for the state, held a statewide conference call. I forwarded that email to, I'm trying to save some here for, I forwarded that email to Molly and Nikki, and they were able to attend that session as well. Take one and pass it along. There's a situation that's going on in the state that Dale Dennis was concerned enough about that he held a statewide conference call to get districts to start thinking about their contingency reserve. What he's very worried about with the school finance situation that has just passed, and there's probably extra, Scott, when it comes around. I think I made extra copies. But what is very concerning is that the state Supreme Court has approved the school finance formula, and yet we're continuing to see contingency reserves increase across the state. And the bottom line is, 10 or 12 years ago, this account didn't even exist. And now that we have this contingency reserve, it is growing in number. And to be quite honest with you, we felt guilty. I will tell you this, Dale called me personally before the conference call, and that might be a light bulb, right? I talked to Dale myself, and then after I got back from my vacation, I met with Nikki and Molly, and we were looking at what we could do, and there was a lot of question, and of course we are into this on our own, and we're looking at it. So I just called Dale right at that moment, and we had him on conference call, and we talked through the projects that we had in mind. And the bottom line is, if I can get you to agree to make some of these changes from what you've already approved that we spend, and take some of it out of the contingency reserve, it not only lowers our contingency reserve, which is what Dale said we need to do, but it then frees up our capital outlay to give us some freedom for some other projects that will come down the road. And just so you know, and one of the questions I did ask, we will still have a higher contingency reserve than is currently in the books and was looked up by Dale himself than Garden City, Liberal, Salina, Emporia, and Hayes, I believe. There were at least 5 schools. I know the first 4 named, we looked up purposely because they're similar dynamics, they're similar size, and we'll still have a higher, not by much in a couple of cases, but still we'll have the highest of those contingency reserves
After we take out,
after we take this money out that you approve. Dale's point was, you remember when there was fear of the sweeps across the state, which would be a legal nightmare. I don't think you could sweep local taxpayer dollars, but that's a whole nother argument. I don't need to go there. But it does leave for good standing. Now, we did have some projects in mind. We did have reason that we were saving. There has always been the worry that the state won't come through with the money, and we want to be able to back our payroll. We can still back our payroll. So, I mean, we haven't alleviated those concerns. It's just a manifestation of having the account and what occurs in a finance year when you do have extra money, and that's where you put it, and then you build that up. And Dale was very deliberate about the fact that this needs to be addressed.
Right.
So this is an excellent way for us to address it. It serves a purpose that you had, A, already approved, and B, gives us the freedom for some other things that we yet know in the future. So I think it is good planning, and it's a great opportunity.
do you have a number in mind of where our contingency reserve should be at?
Honestly, where we're at is a good spot, and that would give us room to ebb and flow. But what I do want to talk about, and it's another consideration sheet, is the iPad line item and what we're doing with that in the future, and we'll talk about that more. So I think there's some room to float there a little bit as well. So I think, I mean, and if you do this in your home finances, enough is never enough, and you always want more. But the interesting thing that we have to keep in mind is we are in the business of education. We are not a financial institution. And the money that we receive and we've asked for is for the betterment of our students and our children
Right.
and our schools. And so carrying over a large number, while it has some advantages, it isn't necessarily the intent of what school finance is for us to be. I believe that in all my heart, and I'm not ashamed to have that approach. I answer to you, we never do anything without the board supporting the projects that we talk about or that we do. And I believe that we've talked about this in cabinet. You know, we've built up a nice reserve, but we have a lot of things going on that are going to help kids. And that's not going to come free. It's going to take money, it's going to take some time, and we're ready to invest in that. So I just thought it was very interesting, the timing of how the statewide concern came at the same time we had this with the number of projects that we had, and it really helps answer some of those questions that we weren't able to answer last month, truthfully. And now we have this answer, and I think it comes at a good time. So I ask for your support.
Was Dale, or there's a legislature talking about doing away with the contingency fund? Is that one of the reasons for the concern?
No, I think they're talking, we don't want them talking about doing away with it.
Yeah.
And I think some of the talk has been about whether there should be parameters on that, or whether they can take some of the extra off the top. I don't think there's any talk right now about that. Dale's conference to every superintendent in the state that called in anyway was to avoid that from happening.
I appreciate Dale taking the initiative in the KSB. But if I was a legislature and I saw these school districts, I would be torqued, because after what they've been through in this last session. So I think it's, and I appreciate your view. We're here to educate kids, not store money, not stash money.
Yeah, it's prudent for us.
I really appreciate that.
Yeah,
And-
absolutely.
But I understand the legislature's angst with us.
Right.
Yeah.
And the truth of the matter is, we're sitting in that category.
Right.
And that's why this is a good answer. And, the phone conference happened in my office, but Molly and Nick were there. And, I mean, we walked Dale through every item, and we listed the 235 and the 1.7. And, I mean, we talked about all of those and made sure he was good with that. So I feel very confident in what I've presented to you, that it's been taken all the way to Topeka. So I thank you for that.
Well, just on another note, we're going to need some help at 613 dealing with that.
Well, and I've already started that conversation. I had lunch with John Maples and told him exactly what we were doing, and knowing that his reserve was higher than mine.
Right, we've got to address that.
No, I told him that would
Thank
be
you.
coming, because he wasn't able to take part in that, and so I told him to call Dale to get the gist of it. So,
Absolutely.
yep, I've already started that.
Good.
So we need a motion.
Yes, we do.
I would make a motion, we approve is this the previous capital outlay expenditures to be paid from the contingency reserve?
If you don't mind being a little more specific, because I do point out that.
I read it just like you wrote it.
Well, yeah.
Can we say staff recommendation?
Yes, what I'm trying to point out is there were 2 HVAC that we had approved previously, and we're only asking for one of them to come out of the contingency, so I just wanted to be specific on that, so that we get the right items.
Okay. Thank you, Madam President.
It is just as we wrote it.
Okay, I make the motion for both projects. Does that do it?
There's 3, actually.
Okay,
Do you want Ryan to make the motion? and you
go
can
ahead.
second?
I make, for the
Can we
3
make a
projects, I make the motion.
Motion to approve staff recommendation. That should
That'll
encompass.
cover it.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, I think it's a motion by Ryan and a second by Jeff.
I'm good.
All in favor? 7-0.
Read it just like.
And I will point out that that does include the Kansas Heritage Center, and that does clear our financial obligation, and that's a good thing.
Yes.
We don't have to look back on that, so, and that takes care of that, so I'm very happy for that. Okay, the next item, I'm asking you to approve transferring almost $1 million into our textbook fund, instead of putting that money in the iPad Initiative Fund. That will leave the money that is in the iPad Initiative Fund, but we don't need to keep building that, because right now, we are at a point where curriculum-wise, we know we're making some serious investment in the future on textbooks, and we're contemplating what our next move is going to be. We know technology is a part of our future, and we know that our curriculum will include technology. We don't know how far it's going with or without the iPads yet, and Scott, you may want to elaborate on this a little bit, but that's one of the areas that we will be making determinations on. And so at this point, using the process that the board had approved earlier, it does not serve the purpose of the district's current needs to continue with what we've been doing. And this will give us direction to go with our needs that we see coming up. We haven't ordered curriculum series in a long while, and we're getting ready to make that investment. And I don't know that I can pinpoint what price that's going to be. We haven't looked at price points yet, but I know it's going to be a significant amount because we're a large district, and we want to be able to do it. So in looking at all of our options, this makes a lot of sense for the same reason, I think, because I think at the time, we all thought iPads were going to do more in help of the curriculum. And now we realize that we still have to have curriculum in place and that iPads can still do a lot for us, but we still have to have and when I say textbooks, we're talking about the entire series and supports. We're talking about all of that. Can you elaborate a little bit on that? You might have to poke that microphone in front of you to do that, though.
The one that we're in right now is English language arts, which will be significant, and then we're going to follow that up with math. And so I can't give you a price tag. I think it's like anything else. We have to really vet what they're selling versus what we need, and then be purposeful with that. I will say that Fund 15, which is our professional development, has to be equally looked at as we go through this. It's not just the purchase of the material, but what are we doing to make sure that we have PD embedded in the front end, but then throughout the process. So that's going to be a very purposeful look. Ray and I have had preliminary discussions this second semester. This coming school year, we're going to take a deep dive district-wide into identifying our K-12 technology proficiency standards and align them with the state and the college career readiness indicators so that we can identify what should, for example, a kindergartner be able to show and demonstrate when it comes to technology proficiency. Once we do that, we'll identify, because I think what is most important to understand is that a device is a tool. It's a tool. It's no different than when we got graphing calculators or calculators in general. It's a tool, and we have to know when to apply that and then make sure that our teachers are skilled at using that tool. It more than likely will look quite a bit different than what we're doing. And so I know part of our conversation is the budgetary cycle, because these are significant purchases that we've got one coming at the end of this fiscal year in preparation for fiscal year 2021. And so we are going to be in advance of that to say, what would this look like? And it could look totally different based on the levels. But I do know, as I stated, the commitment is that PD is going to be embedded in this as well. It's got to be a significant consideration as we look at those funds.
And this transfer positions us very well and gives us a little more security, if you will, for making that move. And really, this action is just part of that support for us to move forward with the curriculum, which the administration met today for a lengthy day with MTSS on what we're going to do to implement whatever we choose. So, I mean, all the spokes are coming together, and we're trying to get it to work in the right way. So,
Do we have an idea of what the current balance is in curriculum,
in curriculum
in the
itself?
budget?
Yes, there is a balance in textbooks. Is that what you're
Yes,
referring to? Yes, I have seen that number. It's nothing outstanding, but there was a number there. It just hasn't been added to because it's all been going to iPads, and that's why I wanted to put more money in that, because I knew we had this coming up. So
Very good.
I can't think of that off the top of my head, but I have seen a number, and there is an account that exists for that. So
Okay,
way to catch me off guard.
sorry.
So is the implementation of the English curriculum and the math curriculum, is that for the upcoming academic year, or is that for?
2021. And so we'll front load, that's for ELA, English Language Arts for literacy. This year, we're working on counselors, music, and we'll start PE. So we'll start some of those elective review processes and then any associated materials that go along with it, so that we know we can save the bulk of our funds for when we get into ELA. We'll start the initial phase of the math review beginning in January. And so it'll be about a year and a half process before, in spacing when we fully implement ELA versus, and then to math. And then we'll start going through science and social studies after that. So once we get through it, I'll have a better understanding of kind of what the cost will be. And again, we want to make sure that we're purchasing things that meet our students' needs. So we're really looking at EL supports within these. And as you've approved, our assessment pieces tie into this too. So FastBridge that the board approved as universal screeners. We'll start getting into some diagnostic screeners as well. And so all this stuff is phased into our approach. And when we present the overview of the state assessments, and I'll give you a very clear picture as far as, and this will be an upcoming board meeting, of what we have in place that builds upon addressing student outcomes. And because all this is just very systematic.
Very good.
This is probably very part of it. So we're transferring money from the 1920 iPad to the 1819 textbook fund. Is that right? That just seems applying it to last year or.
What you're allowing us to do is to take money that would otherwise has already been designated to go to the iPad fund and to move it to the textbook fund. And we're asking you to transfer these funds only this year, which is 18-19. In other words, every year I'm going to come back to you and tell you what we're doing with that money that you've already earmarked for iPads every year. And so actually all I'm asking for is a one-year change until we know what we're doing. So it's a little bit confusing on the numbers, but what we're trying to point out there is that it's this year I'm asking you to do that because we feel it's in the best interest. Part of what you need to realize is that iPad fund is in the contingency reserve, which keeps going up. So by moving this money to textbook, that's not going to help that go up this year. And we'll gauge it based on what our order size is for our curriculum needs and what we'll do next year. So next year about this time, if not earlier, I should be telling you what we're going to do with that money next year. So
It'd be interesting to me to see the mix between curriculum, textbooks, those things, and technology. And how, because
I think that's a great point, because in the future, I don't think there's going to be a mix. I think they're one and the same. You know what I'm saying?
yeah, but if we're buying paper and we're buying technology,
Yep.
there's a mix. I mean, that's the one that my mind can.
In my mind, there's going to be a mix for many years to come.
Yeah,
And-
more
and there
likely there'll
should,
be a
because-
blended approach to this, but it may not look like a one-to-one device. So we need to collect data right now on how it's being used. But more importantly, I firmly believe we have to identify what it is our kids should be able to show and demonstrate, and then we go then and purchase it, whether it's a printed material for our content or it's a device that helps support it. I've heard a lot of anecdotal feedback from buildings as far as concerns about students' access. I mean, there's just some logistic things to Netflix and YouTube and our ability as an organization to filter those things. Those sometimes are, I mean, they're definitely realistic issues we have to deal with, but sometimes they can be inappropriate drivers. We need to design what the tools are to be used for and at what level. I mean, is it appropriate for, a third grader to be carrying around an iPad or a Surface Pro or something? Maybe not. But is it appropriate for them to have technology in the classroom for either tier 2? Probably, more than likely. Now we get to the high school, they're going to be entering into a post-secondary or a career workforce where a lot of them more than likely are going to have to be tech proficient and probably on multiple platforms. I mean, currently most of our kids don't utilize Microsoft Office, which is probably the number one suite of services that are being utilized in the professional setting. Mm-hmm. And so there are things in there we have to really dig into and align. So I see a blended.
Yeah, I was going to say that. I mean, so a kid can use an iPad. It doesn't help me at Servitech.
Right.
Microsoft Office, and, you go through, the whole gamut of programs.
Yeah, it's been a while, actually, since we've talked about the iPad
Right.
initiative, but did we ever implement any measurable outcomes for the iPad initiative? Like, this is what the objectives
Have
we're
to
trying
yield
be.
to the outer banks here.
I have not seen it, but
No, I think initially we thought that a lot more of the curriculum would come specifically from here, and at first it had that appearance, but when you really get into it, then it was, well, but you gotta pay for this program, and then pay for this program, and then pay for this program, and so that kind of all got caught up in standard changes and that kind of stuff. So to be able to go and pinpoint specifically the impact of that versus the other factors,
Yeah.
I don't think we have. Ray, would you have anything else there?
I wouldn't have anything else to add.
So are students still receiving iPads? Like,
Kindergarten through high school is a one-to-one. The high school takes them home. They stay at school for kindergarten through 8th grade.
and we have data that shows in first grade, this is what our first graders are using the iPads for.
Yeah.
They use it for X, Y, and Z this percent of the time. And we have data for that for third grade and eighth grade.
I don't know if we could go in and, we wouldn't have an exact, they spend 20% of this and
Well,
80% on that.
Their
no,
lesson
but-
is,
And that really depends at this point on the teacher. When it was rolled out, there was kind of really clear expectation to get to know how to use it and to teach the kids how to use it. Again, with the expectation that a lot of the curriculum would be free to access on here. When that didn't really roll out, then they became more of like a enhancement or enrichment to a lesson. And some teachers really do utilize a lot of the technology, some teachers don't as much.
Yeah.
So I don't know that there would be a specific average.
what was the first year that,
The careers in our community is we're going to put out students that are productive and have that ability. And I think we're doing all the right things to be serious about that. So appreciate your support.
I appreciate the work and I appreciate the emphasis. Because it's vital. I just don't, I get tired of the latest, greatest.
Yeah.
You know, you hear the latest, greatest stuff, you know, from year to year.
Absolutely.
Okay, any other questions?
I make a motion for approval for the board designated iPad initiative funds transfer.
Yeah, I forgot we needed a vote. Second.
Motion by Tammy and a second by Tracy, all in favor? 7-0.
She read it like it was written and everybody was good with it.
Okay,
it's just you,
I
Jeff.
appreciate your efforts there, and after working through that difficult item, I'd like to talk to you now about something I'm a lot more confident in, and that's orchestra bids.
It just keeps getting better.
Everybody believe me, right?
Oh, Lord.
I do know that we have a plan, and I do know that it's been worked on. What's disappointing is we only received one bid. But knowing that bids were let, and the bid did come in within what was the anticipated 3-year budget, it does meet within the criteria. And I do think it's very important that we provide proper instrumentation for our programs so that they can be successful. And one way you do it is by maintaining a good inventory. So basically, what this is requesting is that give authorization to make the purchase of this sole bid that we did receive, and I do believe more bids than that went out. I don't have the company there, but I think there's support letters showing that. So I would just ask for your support for that, and
I really appreciated the letter from Jason about the instruments and
Absolutely,
how they were
absolutely.
chosen and that,
yeah, there's a method to
Yes,
it, and there's a
yes.
process. So, yeah, thank you for pointing
I
that out.
appreciate that.
Yep.
I'll make a motion for approval.
I will make a motion to approve.
Well, you can second, Ryan just made the
Oh,
motion.
I'm sorry.
I was just gonna, we're on the same page, though.
We've got a motion by Ryan and a second by Pamela, all in favor? 7-0.
Okay, the next item is the finish of the damaged floor at Northwest, where we did have a water service pump failure. And there were two options, and it was decided that it would better serve the facility to refinish the entire floor, which is just under 5,000 more, just over 5,000 more, 5,100 it looks like. But that work does need to be done, and your approval will try to help expedite.
I have a question.
getting it?
In
Okay.
that area where that pump is there a drain of any kind there? Because it seems like we're,
There is talk of something that we're doing to make it different so we don't keep having that happen.
like a drain, big hole in the floor so that the water goes down and not out.
I'm familiar with the drain, yes.
Yeah, Chris.
I've had 3 daughters. I've seen a lot of drains and long hair and everything else. I don't know the answer on how we did it, because I do know this. We looked at moving that whole structure, but it was cost prohibitive. And so there is something that is being proposed. I don't see anyone here, Chris isn't here tonight, that could answer that question quickly.
I think that we had that discussion some time
I
ago.
know we have.
And Chris was here and was
And presented,
explaining
yeah.
the
Yep,
idea.
yep.
And
I'm blank on that right now, but there is something in the works, because this isn't the first time this has happened,
no,
and
that's
it won't be the last,
No.
unfortunately. Because the warning mechanism doesn't give you enough time to prevent the damage from happening, so.
was it moving it out to a separate,
And that was cost prohibitive after we looked at that, so they came up with another option, and I would be wrong to try to guess what that was.
I hate to keep spending,
I get
$25,000 all
that.
the time.
Yeah.
And put in a $500 drain and.
Problem is, the damage has already been done to
Right,
what
to
we're
have to
trying to
fix
fix
it.
here, and we are trying to make it so it doesn't happen again. So I'll try to give more information on that.
Yeah, maybe we could just get like an update on the weekend review or something.
Yep.
okay,
Make a motion.
all right.
Second.
Motion by Tracy and a second by Jamie. All in favor? 7-0. Well, now we're out of business services, Dr. Dirksen. Are you happy about that?
Okay. All right, now we're back into this domain, and Clayton, you might work your way to the microphone because you might help me on this one, but the first item that I have is on this school board leadership. And really, this is just a discussion with the board right now. But legislature has passed a law, and really, it's kind of interesting because the law doesn't really tell us what to do from now till January. But what the law does say is that in January, you do have to make a decision on how you're going to select your new board members. And there are 2 options. The board may vote to extend the terms of their current president, vice president until the designated January board meeting. And then if the board wants to continue the practice of selecting their board president, vice president, setting their meetings at the July meeting, they can continue to do so using the home rule. However, the board will still have to vote at the designated January board meeting when they want to elect their president and vice president and establish the meeting dates and times. So if we stay the way we currently do it, there's an extra step now involved. If we switch, the problem that I see with switching is it matches with the election. If you switch to go from January to January, but you may be and you may not. I mean, you may be changing roles in the middle of a school budget year that you've already put together with your goals and objectives, and the funding happens in July, and now the leadership's going to happen in January. That's what we're dealing with right here. So, what do you want to add to that? You went to a conference and you heard this topic discussed?
No, I just saw the same memo that I believe you
Yeah, I
included
included it
in the packet. So I don't have anything to add. I think the pros and the cons are what you just stated. To me, it seems cleaner to extend the current officers to January, and then it lines up with the election. So if somebody's elected in November, then in January, you would elect officers. It seems to flow better, I think.
You think that flows better?
I do.
Yep.
Even though it interrupts a fiscal year every time. It doesn't line up well with that, and I agree with that. But
what was the part about the resolution? Is the resolution to go till January, or?
The resolution could be presented next month to extend the current officers to January, so you wouldn't have officer elections this July. And then from there on, it would just be established in January.
So transversely, you could select officers in July, and then in January, you would have to described that you are going to extend the term until next July.
I believe that's correct, yes.
I mean, it's as confusing as it gets.
Right, so with moving it to January, you
That's what I
extend it
said.
once. You extend it this July to January, and then establish by resolution that in every January is officer elections, and then you don't have to do anything else after that.
What I know is in January, we have to talk about this again.
Correct.
And we probably will be talking about it next month as well.
Yes, I think you'll need to decide at the next meeting what you're going
And
to.
that's my point. No matter what we decide at the next meeting in January, we'll be talking about this again. And that's by law, because it has to be. So I think the reason I selected this as discussion is ultimately it comes down to what the board prefers. It's totally up to all of you.
I'd rather go through the budgeting process, just like you say, the funding budgeting process with the same leadership. And as Clayton said, I think it's cleaner than if we address it in January. But we keep current leadership through, the rest of the year.
Yeah,
Because
so
it's just
more
cleaner.
or less just keep it the
Right.
way we
Yeah.
are. So then
Because
then
I
the
don't want to change
officers
leadership in the
would,
middle of
yeah,
the budgeting process.
the officers would stay in place then for the entire
Right.
academic year. That's what I would
No,
propose.
no, the
So you're
calendar
saying
year.
switch the officers in January?
Well, we would vote on it, doesn't mean we switch, but
Yeah, we
we'd
could
vote
pass the
on it.
resolution not to switch, and then we would delay.
Okay, now
Yeah.
I'm confused again.
Okay.
Well, I think it's two options. Do you want to elect officers in July, or do you want to elect officers in January?
That's the choice.
Yeah.
So then we can do it either way, but that's the ultimate question.
So you're saying you think it'd be better to do it in January,
No.
July?
Okay.
Okay,
Then we're,
yeah, yeah.
Yep.
we're on the same
Through
page.
all that, we agreed?
We did.
Okay.
Yep. As confusing as that was, you both had the same idea. Does anybody think January is better than July?
My only argument had to be is if one of the incumbents doesn't get reelected, that doesn't give the new school board person a voice in deciding that. They come in, if a new board sits in January, I mean, at this point, they are stuck with what they.
Actually, though, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think we have to make this decision again in January.
January
Yes.
instead of July.
It would be
That's what
back
I was saying.
And so the
That's
new
what-
board
right.
members could come
Could
in though
decide.
and not want to do it in July. And they could override a vote, I guess, more or less at that point.
I'm sure after hearing all this confusion, they'll have a very clear point of view. So,
We'll roll with it.
I know what I'm thinking, I just don't know if I can
Yeah,
explain it.
I don't think it's as complicated when you really lay it out on paper, because I appreciate Clayton. Really, all we're talking about is, are you selecting the president and vice president in July or in January? And right now, I'm hearing that people like doing it in July. So if we hold elections in July, we have one meeting in July, so it will happen at our next board meeting. Then in January, we will still have to make note or give recognition to which process we're carrying through.
Right.
And maybe by then, KESB will provide different guidance of why it would be better in January or whatever that might sway an opinion. And if not, we'll just stick with what we've said tonight. We're going to go with July.
Cleaning it up.
So,
Yeah.
Clayton, I'm confused by what was said up here, because I thought you said January, not July.
I say January,
I-
because
He said,
Fred said-
he's the only one that said January.
if you have officers that go off the board,
January was better.
and you're going to have to move in new officers in the middle of the year, it just seems cleaner to do it.
Do it
in-
with the
in-
vote.
If you're going to have a
When they come
November
into
election,
office.
see, you had July because you had April elections, I believe, or whatever it was before.
Yeah, because I came in at an odd time. My election was, maybe I was just odd. Maybe that was.
Well, we have a legislative committee meeting in August, so I'll be up in Topeka. This will be on
You
the
find out for us,
agenda, so
Ryan.
we'll see if we can confuse it anymore. I don't
But
know.
we
Well,
can't wait
okay.
till August.
Well, and ultimately, what you could do is you could vote next month. They have this, this resolution to extend officers till January. So you could extend it to January and then ultimately decide to pass another resolution extending it to July of 2020 and stay on the July cycle.
We could
Or
just keep making that resolution every,
Yeah, you
push it
could.
on down the road.
I think, again, to simplify it, when do you want to elect officers? But if you're going to do it in January, or in July, then every January you may have to extend
Again.
to July, because you're getting out of sync with what apparently the legislature wants you to do.
I see that point, but I also see July as our organizational meeting where we do all that stuff.
Right.
So,
So we just have to know what the end goal is for you guys, and then we can make it happen no matter what the choice is.
If you would look at page 127 on the considerations moving forward, I think there are some good points down at the bottom of the page. Number one, the board must act to set the election of their officers and their meeting dates at their January 2020 board meeting. If the board decides to continue to make these decisions at their July organizational meeting, which is what we talked about, they would need to act to do so every year at the January board meeting. So that's going to be a new twist to the process. It has to take place every year until something changes on this. And the intent was to provide the school boards with the flexibility to determine what they want from their boards.
I see, I thought it was simple. We would just extend from July to January, and then in January, we would have our election, and then we could get on a January cycle.
That's what I thought.
If you want to be on a January cycle, but I'm so confused because I thought you wanted to be on the July
In my
cycle.
mind, I've heard you say two different things.
No, I think the January cycle makes sense.
I do too.
so
you and Ryan
if we stick
Talk
with,
about the July
if we
cycle.
stick with the July one, then every
Every January,
January,
we've got
we
to
have
do
to
that again.
reaffirm it. If we move to January, then we go, every January, we select the board leadership.
And the reason the resolution exists is if we elect officers in July, by statute, that election is good for 1 year. Does that make sense? And that's, so the resolution is allowing you to extend the current officers for 6 months, and then you propose the 1 year.
That's what I thought, that's what I was talking about.
Right.
We extend it to January, and then we go from January to January.
Right, that's my recommendation.
That's the design of what is there. So now you are,
I agree with that.
Opposed to
So
Ryan.
now we.
Oh, good. I love this place
To
now,
one
right?
another.
I'm good with that.
When I listened to this at that legal conference thing that I went to,
yes.
and it made just about as much sense, but I came away thinking what Clayton thought, that January would be the best to just move everything to January, just clean, just do it then.
I will, okay,
But I don't-
here's my
But I
recommendation.
read it, and Ray read it.
Yep, I will try to create this for board action like we normally do in July, and we'll have one of two options. We'll either have election of officers or approval of a resolution. And then at that point, you can decide, are we just going to go to January, or are we going to elect the officers, knowing that we'll have to do something in January no matter what decision we make? I think that says it.
Right, present the two options.
Yep.
We'll stay on the July or extend it to January and get on the January cycle.
Okay.
Okay. Okay, I feel better about that. Glad we got that straightened out.
Well, no,
Can we talk about drains and plumbing again?
please.
All right. Next item is first reading for updates in policies. I did provide the supportive materials. Unfortunately, I don't know why they keep coming up with grammatical fixes and changes. If they've done it once, why does it keep changing? I don't know. So there weren't near as many major changes. Some were just simple grammatical fixes. And then there were some changes that came from the federal executive branch. And I did provide the red print so you can see what changes are being recommended, so you can go through there and follow that. And I will have for you at the next meeting any recommendations that we as an administrative team have on any of these. My philosophy has always been, and we saw this firsthand Mr. Turner did a good job of working with KASB and putting together a workshop that was held here for our administrators on school law. And the attorney that was here, Angela Stahlbaumer, made reference and cited several board policies, and we were able to look and to make sure that we had the updated policy that she referred to. And because what I always worry about, if you don't stay with what your representation on the School Board Association is recommending, then what good are you? I mean, you're left without. And so, and Clayton, you were there too for that session, weren't you? So, yeah, Clayton was at that session also. So I thought it was really valuable for our district administrative team. And the best thing about it was held right here at the Learning Center, and we were able to have all of our administrators that were here to be there. So I want to publicly thank Matt for his organization on that and getting that going too. So good team effort.
Very good.
So there's nothing more on this right now other than to just let you know, currently this does happen twice a year that we have these updates. So this is the next run. So I'll give you feedback. And it was pointed out by Deborah to me that this is the first time we've had table of contents included as well. So I thought that was an interesting side note. All right. Any comments or questions at this point? Next item that I wanted to bring to you tonight was a request from the board that we do have a discussion on our safety and security role. We are a week away from implementing that new position. We do have the Director of Safety and Security with us in our presence, and I've asked him to appear at the microphone, but apparently he's a little shy right now. But I am pretty sure that he's sticking with me on this. So I'm very excited about this role, and I do believe,
Always good.
if I can describe it best, I think we're in our incubation phase of development. However, I know we have set some targeted goals as far as establishing what we'd like to see accomplished. And I've met with Sean several times, and we've talked about how we envision this. Let's just talk about some simple logistics first of all. We, in talking to Sean, I gave him the option, and he chose to receive the mileage and use his own truck because of what we didn't have much available. And I don't think he was too interested in hopping in an Impala or whatever it was from the transportation department. So I think we're going with the mileage for the use of his pickup because we do see him at sites every day. And we do have an office. Next year, we'll actually be housing the Alternative Education Center. It's not much of an office, but it is a place where you can have a desk and we can say we have an office. But the Director of Safety is going to be out and about and doing assessment in all of our facilities. And it's going to be a constant assessment because I feel like those things can change at any time. We are going to really lean on him a lot for our ALICE training to make sure that that's being scheduled appropriately with our administrators in our buildings. I want him to get out into the community and make sure that he's making the connections with the county and the city and the police departments and the fire departments, and making sure that we have all of those connections and relationships together, because safety is a community effort and it cannot stand still. We have to always be working toward that goal. I know Sean has a couple of things that he wants to talk about that he put together too, so.
Good evening, board members. I just had a couple of things. First of all, my goal for this position, well, first of all, I should say thank you for approving this position. My goal for this position is to aid the district in providing a safe and secure environment for learning for all of our students and staff. I think that's probably everything with safety is still going to go back to learning and providing a good environment for that. This is a new position that I'm already finding out is going to change constantly. I mean, everything you do can probably go back to safety and security, a lot of different things. So it's always going to be needing to be tweaked a little bit for the position, and it'll depend on the needs of the schools and the different things that I see when I'm going out and doing audits and assessing different schools. I've already talked to some principals about getting into their school and doing some inspections and audits, and I want to meet with them. I want to meet with the custodians, people that know what the needs of the buildings are. I also want to help develop safety and security policies, procedures, anything necessary as far as training goes. We've already done some of the ALICE training last year, and that's another thing that's going to have to be done every year with new staff and everything. So the audits, I'm going to report and recommend to Dr. Dirksen and the board anything that I see. I want to conduct or coordinate safety and security exercises with law enforcement and other first responders, and assist with research and writing safety and security grants. There are quite a few of those out there, and I feel like we should use them if we can get those. Assist and maintain the district crisis plan and help with make sure that it's meets the standards that the state sets, and also help the principals with individual building crisis plans. And then, as Dr. Dirksen said, I want to communicate with students, staff, and families, and the patrons of the district about the efforts towards safety and security that the district is doing.
My intention is for Sean to have a post at every council meeting so that every month we're addressing safety to the entire administrative team. And we've talked about making sure that he gets to every building on a regular basis as well. And I believe we're very innovative in this, and I believe some of these roles will change and will grow. But I know that the word is already out. I've had a conversation with several administrators who have great interest in what we are doing, and I feel confident that putting an emphasis on safety is going to help us amplify, if you will, our focus on safety to make sure that we are always giving that consideration. And that's what I expect Sean to be a part of, is to make sure that we are always thinking about those strategies. Never again am I going to have to regret not linebackering somebody that jumps on the stage during graduation, because my safety guy is going to take care of that before it happens. So anyway, so that's another example of just a situation, and it really dramatized how quickly that happens too.
So I'm guessing that you'll also audit like Memorial Stadium and those kind of facilities as well?
I think it's gonna take a lot of time to get through all of the buildings, but eventually I would think all the grounds and other district buildings as well.
Mm-hmm.
Hey, Sean, have you had any communication with our insurance carrier?
I have not.
I would recommend that you get with Mary Trent, because they have EMC insures schools all over the Midwest, and they're very interested in safety and security, obviously, especially the ALICE training. And do we have a budget for safety? I mean, do we have any kind of budget?
No, we've always carried safety in the maintenance and buildings area, and so we'll have to figure out how we're going to divvy that out. But the point is, we now have emphasis on safety, rather just being an add-on in one of those departments, and so that's really the direction that I've asked you to go, and you've supported, and I feel very confident that we're got the right person and we're going in the right direction. So.
You bet.
Right. Thanks,
you.
Sean.
Thanks, Sean.
Thank you.
I didn't have to use we had a secret signal if I thought he was talking too much, and I didn't have to use it. We'll see if it expands from there. And he offered to use the same for me. So. All right. I think that concludes my report.
Okay. All right, Board of Education member, district responsibilities, Park and Rec, Jamie, do you have?
They had canceled the meeting the last time.
Okay, all right. Bright Beginnings Head Start, Ryan?
I probably won't have anything till September.
Yeah, okay. Special ed, Jeff?
We're in negotiations and a lot of discussion about how we handle that. I think that the teachers, the negotiators came with some really fair requests. I'm anxious to talk to John about Dale Dennis's call and Dr. Dirkson's conversation with him. I will not be here in January.
July.
Yeah, no, I'm working. Been a long day. July,
July, and it's the third Tuesday?
I think, yeah.
Third Tuesday? Okay.
It's on Tuesdays.
Okay.
So if you could do that, that would be wonderful.
Okay. Yeah.
And I would like to talk to you about it.
Okay. Yeah, I can do that.
So, but anyway, things are moving towards a new year.
Very good. Legislative, Pamela? Anything new?
KASB had on there today that they are bringing out the 2020 census, getting ready for that already, and how important it is. That's kind of the look I thought, 2020 census. It starts April 1st, and they said that we're historically undercounted. Young children are, and minorities, and a lot of the kids, people who we have in our school district are undercounted, and so they've asked for us to maybe form even complete count committees so that we're involved in making sure census gets taken out here. It involves a lot of money, a lot of the money, federal monies we receive, Title I, Supplemental Nutrition Assistance, Head Start, Medicare, Medicaid, infrastructure money, so it's a ton of money.
It's important.
So it behooves us as a district to make sure that we're kind of at the head of this, pushing it. And there was a lot of really good information about different little activities you could do in the classroom about the census, so I thought that would be good as well.
Okay. Capital outlay, any?
Do you know if we're gonna, when we'll have capital outlay? Has that been talked about, or?
Well, I've had conversation with Capital Outlay, but it's outside of the meeting, but I believe Capital Outlay has been spent based on all of the information that we have, so we'll have to work towards having a meeting for next year that really targets the areas that because isn't it typical that you try to have the Capital Outlay meeting to list the priorities, so.
Yeah, clear back, yeah. a long
Yeah,
time ago.
yeah, so we'll try to reorganize that and make that happen.
All right.
And calendar committee, no meeting.
No meeting.
I think the Kansas Heritage Center, we can take off of there now, because that's a done deal.
I'll make that note.
And review district bills prior to July's meeting. Tracy? All right, we're ready for announcements. Wednesday, June 26th, Dodge City Ford County Development Corp. Business Resource Fair Luncheon at Hoover Pavilion from 11 to 1:30. Monday, July 8th, Board of Education Annual Organizational Meeting here in the Austin Boardroom at 6 o'clock. We will not have a second meeting in July. Do we have any items for future board meetings or additional information?
Yeah, where are we now with school with fair funding? I mean, can we stop paying attorneys?
Those attorneys.
Clarify your question, please.
Sorry, Clayton.
No, here, that's a great question, and where I know that we're at is they were waiting for the court to make its decision.
Right.
And then they were going to call us together, and I have not seen any email exchange where they're calling us together.
Well,
And then we will have that conversation when it's called together, what are our next steps? And my hope is that we are pursuant to be supportive of what the court has agreed to, what the legislature agreed to, and what the governor proposed. And
At
that's
some
the role
point in
I
time,
want.
I would like for us as a board to have a discussion so we can give you the direction that you need when you go to that meeting.
Well, in light of the fact that it could be as early as next week that they call the meeting, I would ask that you give me that direction now with my thinking. I don't know if I should be saying this out loud or not, but I think that we have an obligation to support what the legislature has approved and what the Supreme Court said was substantially satisfactory.
Right.
Everybody agree with that?
That's why I'm asking the question.
And that's
because
what my
I think-
role is going to be. And if there is, I know for a fact there's at least one other of the 4 original schools that feel the way I do. And I have not been able to talk to one. And the 4th, if you will, is what I would call riding the fence. They would like to get every dollar they possibly could and would be willing to challenge it. And I told that individual, we're not there. And I thought I was speaking on behalf of the board when I said that. And that's what I plan to take to that meeting. And if there is any direction, and I can't speak for how that meeting is going to go, but if there's any direction proposing the other way, then I would like to bring it to a vote, because we always talk about the 4 schools, but there's over 40 schools that support Schools for Fair funding. And their money has been as important as our money, because they've had to pay dues as well. And I think they ought to have a right to a vote too. And I would like to force that to come to a vote that it is decided there. So, but I believe right now we need to be very supportive of the direction that we've heard from
From the courts and the
the courts
legislature.
and the legislature.
I agree.
That's kind of what I wanted to get out of the
Great.
table.
Great. In Bill's absence, I might see if Clayton can go along, and I might see if a board member can go along, because I would like for people to be there when we have these conversations. We can't overlook what has been accomplished, and Dodge City should feel good about that. And people that have been a part of Dodge City Schools long before me deserve the credit, because they're the ones that really made a difference and really got every school district in the state to be recognized for adequacy and equity, and that should never be overlooked.
No, it
But at
has
some point, we reach a tipping point where enough is enough already, because as a Kansan, I care about our highways, I care about our prisons, I care about all those things that are going on, and higher education. I mean, the list goes on. So we need to recognize that we have been treated well, and we need to do the best we can with it. So
Right.
that's my position.
Agreed.
That's good.
Okay, anything else? All right, we need an executive session.
And Madam President, if you'd flip those 2 around, I think I could let 2 go after. I would like Clayton and Dr. Nance and Dr. Springston to be here for negotiations.
Okay, how long do you think we need for that?
10 minutes.
Okay,
Do you have any need for her on standby if we get to elementary, or do you just?
No, I think we're good on that. Well, no. Am I missing something? I don't think anything.
No, we're okay.
And then I thought on non-elected personnel, I think I can handle that myself and let Ramona and Scott go home. So-
okay.
and-
So our first is for negotiations for 10 minutes.
Yep.
We need Clayton, Dr. Nance, and
Dr. Springston.
Dr. Springston.
Yep. Yeah, I feel good about that.
Make a motion.
Okay, a motion by Ryan, second by Jamie. All in favor? 7-0.
It is true. All the new people